Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share scary college and universities horror stories. First story. I work at a university library. I'm afraid one of the students isn't alive. Heather always struck me as a weird kid, although a very sweet one. She seemed way younger than her peers, like the run of a litter, but I more than once overheard other students talking about her being some sort of teenage genius. As it happens to most brilliant people, she didn't seem to pay a lot of attention to the world around her, but she tried her best. I heard you had a nasty car accident, Miss Thompson. Are you too hurt? She asked me just the other week, her eyes full of genuine concern. I think you're mistaking me for another librarian, darling, I replied, then went back to reading my own book. Our uni was a big complex, with 4 major libraries with 3 or more librarians each, and a few smaller ones. Funnily, all of us lived up to the librarian stereotype very well. 30 or 40-something, tortoise eyeglasses, hair in a perfect bun, a pencil dress topped with a cardigan. There wasn't much to do these days, as our collection was completely cataloged in the uni's app. So we were there mostly to handle paperwork and help with the restricted section, one of the only places that remained completely free from the modern world scrutiny. Most students had no interest in the library, let alone in the forbidden books, so I had all the time in the world to just go around hissing if I wanted to. It was the perfect job for any introvert, a quiet place with little to no interaction. Lately, my days consisted of silently watching over people. Heather, I heard, was pursuing a scientific career, but she always had a dreamy look on her face when she read our books. We were located in the history department. I only became concerned when she started asking for witchcraft books from the restricted section. Oh, I'm just doing some research for fun. Interesting how women turn to magic, because it seems to be the easier way for us to gain power. Huh. She gave me a half smile. She was so pale and clearly concerned about something big. I couldn't help but peek over her shoulder a little. How to create a new human body. Wax. It must amount to 2/3 of the person's original weight. An object they held dear in life. This will bind the soul. The ashes from any book. See above how to ensure that you obtain this material, minimizing loss. As much hair from the subject as possible. This ingredient will give the new body verisimilitude. Please remember that the above is meant to give a new body to a person that's barely clinging to life. If your subject is already passed, it's crucial to add their own ashes and blood from a living fox. In this case, the fox will act as a recipient for the soul and must stay beside the person at all times. Obviously, this was all bullshit. I'm a rational, 33 years old woman after all. I know better. Still, Heather was so pale, her lips were so bluish, that I fear that she was either terminally ill or already dead. Which is a ridiculous thought, but come to think of it, I didn't see her interacting with anyone else but me in the last couple of weeks. Besides, she was a smart kid. If she was dedicating this much time to such things, maybe they held more than historical interest. I was intrigued and had too much time in my hands. My fiancé had been staying at the hospital with his sick mother lately, and I didn't have any pets or roommates, so I had to admit things were a little too lonely. So, over the next few days, I helped Heather get some ancient witchcraft books, then casually walked behind her, looming like a ghost, stealthy as a cat. There was no doubt she was particularly interested in reviving people through old sorcery. The dark circles under her eyes grew bigger by the day. Her hair was matted and tangled, and I started convincing myself that she looked like she was rotting alive. It was a Friday when I couldn't hold back anymore and decided to ask her if she was dying. I gave the poor girl a jump scare. "Oh, it's you, Miss Thompson," she muttered. "No, I'm not dying. This is for someone I know. They must be really important to you." Then I replied, "Well, we're not really close, but I think her dying now would be horribly unfair," she replied, biting her incredibly pale lips. Looking closer, I realized she looked so bad because she hadn't been sleeping or eating properly, focused on her research. "You're a good girl, Heather," I praised her, then started leaving. Miss Thompson, yes. The dying person is you. I laughed. I'm not ill, sweetie. Thanks for worrying. Yes, you're not ill. You're in a coma with no hope of returning. And your body is not actually here. Heather took me to the hospital, where I saw my own body fading. A feeling so eerie it's hard to explain. There was no doubt it was me, badly injured and hanging to life by a thread. When you've been in a coma for weeks like I had, it's hard to come back from it. And even if you do, your muscles will malfunction and your body will be so weak that you're prone to catching a myriad of infections and dying anyway. My sister is a nurse here. That's how I found out about you, Heather explained, in a whisper as she cut a huge piece of my hair. I couldn't stop staring at my physical body. It was so pale, nearly lifeless. Unfortunately, the ritual can only extend your life for a few years, a decade at best. And it can't be done a second time because it won't work with your wax body. I nodded, paying close attention to her. All done here. She carefully placed the hair inside a Ziploc bag. Let's go to your place to gather the other ingredients. I bought the wax in advance. Are you sure you want to do this for me? I asked. Isn't it something evil? Unnatural? Oh, evil and unnatural is what they try to do to you. You'll understand when you meet my sister. But first, let's create your new vessel. My new body was successfully created. I can't recall a lot of details because my soul was being pinned to the wax, and the process can be overwhelming to one's senses, but I remember hearing Heather chanting and a lot of bright lights. Moving around with it felt natural, almost like it was my original body. However, it came with a number of limitations. Heather recited them to me after I spent a few hours learning how to move around in it. Any exam that tries to look inside your body will be unsuccessful and show nothing. You need to avoid getting sick at all costs if you don't want to be studied as a medical aberration. Your body cannot take more than 5 minutes of sunlight a day, and sunscreen doesn't work. The only way is staying indoors as much as possible and always protecting your face with a hat. You can make your body turn to dust at will and reappear in another spot within your view. However, you'll be even more vulnerable to sun for a week after each time. Your body will immediately melt if it touches salt water, hot water, or acid substances. Keep that in mind even for trivial tasks, and always wear gloves just in case. At least once a month, you need to ingest wax to strengthen your body. A single candle will suffice. Is that all? I asked. It isn't that bad. My sister, Susan, will explain the last rule to you, Heather announced, and a woman who looked just like her, but several years older and in white scrubs, entered the room. Miss Laura Thompson, I'm happy to see you well. She greeted me, and we exchanged formalities. You must recall that your fiancé's mother was very ill before your accident, right? I nodded. The details are irrelevant, but that family has been doing it for decades, literally stealing people's lives. They approach someone, establish a bond, then suck their life force, leaving their body as an empty shell. That's what your fiancé and his parents, she did the air quotes, have done to you. Like vampires? Are they vampires? It was all my brain could gather. Heather bit her lip and nodded. And what it has to do with the last rule. The last rule says that you owe a favor to whoever gives your life back. Anything they want to, Susan replied. Heather was sweating and looked so guilty I felt bad for her. And we want you to dispose of them. Strangely, it didn't seem an unreasonable request. After all, they pretty much killed me. Why shouldn't I defend myself? And what you have to profit from it? I asked, my brain finally functioning again. You see, Susan smirked, and in an instant, her sclera turned yellow, her irises turned crimson, and her skin became purplish with a leathery texture. Her canines were huge, and her whole presence emanated menace and malice. We are rivals. Second story. Dorms are weird. So a little background information here. I am a sophomore at East Carolina University, and I recently finished my freshman year. I stayed in a suite type of dorm where I have one roommate, and we share a bathroom and shower with 2 other roommates. Anyways, my roommate, is, well, he's what you expect any first-year random roommate to be. The complete opposite of you. He's dirty and unkempt and weird. Anyways, I recently texted him about an experience I had while staying in the dorm. I don't know why I thought about this experience, but I did and decided to text him. One night on a weekend 4 weeks ago, much like any weekend at ECU, I was out drinking, and I decided around 3 a.m. I would stumble on back to the dorm to sleep and catch some late-night investigation discovery on TV. I remember not seeing my roommate the whole evening, which is not weird, but since we were the same major, I figure I would see him around campus at least. I stumble into my room expecting him to be in bed to greet me with some humorous sarcasm about what I decided to do that night and for him to laugh at me in my stupor. But to my surprise, I walked into my vacant dorm alone. I slipped out of my clothes and decided to take a shower before sleep. I remember hearing my dorm door open, and I figured it was my roommate. So after I got out of the shower, I decided to be decent so I would not bother him. As I walked into my room, I did not see anyone, which was weird because my suite mates were gone for the weekend, so I know they didn't open their door to get in. I shrugged and came to the conclusion I was just too drunk to think right now. I fell asleep. I remember waking up around 6 a.m. to an uneasy feeling. I immediately noticed my TV was turned off and the air conditioner in the room was blasting the coldest air I have ever felt. I look over at my roommate's bed about 10 feet away, and I see what looks like him in the bed, but I couldn't see much because the lights were off. I remember faintly him rolling over slowly to look at me, as if he were waiting for me to wake up. I don't think he noticed I was awake, but I remember seeing his eyes gleam from moon coming from the window on his side. He then continues to stare at me for what seems like minutes, and then he creepily smiles without moving. I decided to go back to sleep because I had work in the morning despite my roommate's creepiness. I woke up the next morning to find myself in my room alone with the TV still off and the air conditioner still blasting cold air. I went to work and carried on with my day. Present day. I texted him recently, like I said, to ask him what that was all about. He then replied asking me what I was talking about. I texted him back the date of the weekend it had happened since it was about 4 weeks ago and told him of my experience and to laugh at him about his creepiness. Now this is where it gets weird. My roommate has just informed me that he was away that weekend and had moved some of his stuff back home before move-out day. I haven't texted him back because I'm scared to learn anything else or that I might scare him as well. Who the hell was in my room that night? What did they want and how did they get in? I know for one I was not too drunk to make up such stuff, and I was not dreaming because it was very vivid. Third story. I had the most terrifying experiences in college. I graduated from high school last year, and like many of my friends, I was so excited to go to college. I had gotten accepted at a school far away from home. I'll leave out the name here for legal reasons, but suffice to say, it was a decent school and would be my first time living away from home for any significant length of time. None of my high school friends were going to the same school as I, so for the first time in my life, I was going to be striking out on my own. As you can imagine, I was very excited. My new college was in a beach town, gorgeous weather, new environment, and it seemed like a whole new world of possibilities was opening up for me. I arrived a week early to settle into my new home, a 2-man dorm in the cheapest student housing I could find. The room itself was pretty nice. After the horror stories I'd heard about dorm living, having a small kitchenette seemed like the height of luxury, so I didn't mind that there were communal showers and toilets for each floor. Now, a word about the communal bathrooms. They were capital C creepy. There wasn't anything specifically awful about them. No rotting smell or cold spots or obvious poltergeists. It was just a combination of age, which had caused the tiles to crack and yellow, overuse, and undercleaning, which had left some pretty gnarly mildew patches around, and a vague sense of unease whenever one entered the room. It was fine enough when the bathroom was full, as gross as that may seem, but when there were 3 showers going and a toilet flushing, well, how can anyone be creeped out? But if I ever had to go in the middle of the night and no one was around, man, I learned how to hold it. By the end of the week, I had finished settling in and had also taken the time to familiarize myself with the campus, finalize my schedule, and start finding the local hangout spots. My assigned roommate never showed up, though, which was a little odd, though not unwelcome. I was finally living on my own, but truthfully, I'd been a little nervous about sleeping in the same space with a total stranger. Looking back on it now, I wish my roommate had shown up after all. Maybe things would have turned out differently. In my preterm wanderings, I had started getting to know a small group of freshmen who, like me, had arrived early and were nervously excited about striking out on their own. They lived in the same housing that I did, and we decided to form a study group. Once the term started, we met up almost daily, either in the library or at a local pizza shop that we just called Joe's. There were 5 of us in all: lanky, quiet David, boisterous Alex, beautiful Sarah, tiny, sarcastic Carla, and of course me. I know those descriptions sound cliche, and maybe they are, but are you really going to remember these random people without some descriptions? I'm really doing this for you, dear reader. I like them all, of course. Not that any of them were particularly close friends of mine, but we all got along fine. Well, sort of. David was a little bit odd. I would sometimes catch him staring at me when he thought I couldn't see him. I'd catch him out of the corner of my eye and turn, just in time for him to be looking somewhere else. Or I'd catch him in a reflection, just a glimpse, quick enough to be unsure if I was really seeing it. He never seemed to do anything else but stare, so I chalked it up as a crush. Hey, I wasn't bad looking and I still had the ego of youth, or at least extreme shyness. Everything wasn't all perfect, of course. I had a heavy course load and far more homework than I had ever been used to in high school. I had a small group of friendly acquaintances, but no close-knit group of friends like I had been used to all my life. I wasn't hurting for money, but I wasn't rich either, and I was starting to think about picking up some part-time work, which never went far because I really had no time for it. And really, underlying all of it was a low-grade feeling of fear that soon grew almost into an outright paranoia that plagued me every time I was on campus. It didn't all happen at once. It gradually grew as the days and weeks flew by. It was the same sense of vague unease I got in the communal bathroom at home, almost like someone was watching me, someone who didn't like me very much. As time progressed, I'd get flashes of cold, and my vision would start to gray out on the edges like flashes of movement or blackness just at the edge of what I could see. Concentrating in class got harder, and I started having nightmares. One nightmare in particular became a sort of recurring dream, and every time I had it, I woke up with a headache. It went like this. I'd be sitting in a lecture hall, taking notes when the feeling started up. I'd get cold, and my vision would start to gray out, and I'd look around, and the lecture hall was empty. I was the only one there. Then the lights would go out, and there'd be this noise, like a high-pitched buzzsaw. Panicking, I'd struggle up out of my seat, like moving through molasses as the noise got louder. Distant screaming started up, and the sounds formed a terrifying counterpoint. The noises got louder, closer, louder, closer, as I tried to bolt for the stairs, struggling through the dream thickness of the room. Then I'd trip, fall, and bang my head on one of the stairs. Not hard enough to knock myself out, but damn sure hard enough to leave me dazed. Panicked, I'd roll over and look down into the dimness of the hall to see the source of the noise. A man with a medical drill, all in doctor's whites, steadily advancing up the stairs towards me, grinning. I'd struggle to get to my feet as he came closer, closer, and then I'd wake up. What was most disturbing about the dream, though, is that every time I had it, I swear he got a little closer. The first time I dreamed it, he had just started up the stairs, but now, after a few months, he was just a few feet below me. Close enough for me to start making out some details, like the fresh bloodstains on his coat, like the fact that he was starting to look familiar. I shrugged all of it off, of course. What was I going to do? Go see the school psychiatrist? Sorry, no. I wasn't crazy, just stressed. It was just nerves. I was in a totally new environment. Finally being an adult, of course I was going to have some problems, which is all nice to tell myself during the day. But after waking up in a cold sweat with a pounding migraine for the 5th night in a row, I Googled nightmare cure and decided to start keeping a dream journal. Dream journal. It read, if you're having recurring nightmares, it may help to keep a dream journal. Note down as many details about the nightmare as you can. Find differences between each episode and thoughts that you have about this. Make sure to write it down as soon as you wake up before you start to forget the details. Well, what the hell? It couldn't hurt, right? I dragged myself through classes the next day, barely able to think. My migraine hadn't gone away, and the constant feeling of being watched was making me jittery. It didn't help that Halloween was getting close, so there were faux scary decorations everywhere. Fake spiderwebs are all fine and good, but I was getting sick of walking right into the middle of them and freaking out. I was leaving my last class for the day when I spotted my little study group heading the other way down the hall. I called out, "Hey guys, wait up." Alex turned and grinned at me. "Oh, so you're alive after all," he yelled down the hall. "Are you coming or what? We haven't seen you in forever." Feeling a little better, I rolled my eyes. Maybe this was what I needed, some company and human interaction. They slowed, so I could catch up as I hurried down the hall towards them. I asked, "Where are we going tonight? Library or Joe's?" Carla smirked, "Somewhere new. I know this may blow your mind, but we aren't all about studying all the time. It's Friday, time for Sarah to slut it up." Sarah thwacked Carla on the arm at that, scowling. "What? It's true," protested Carla. "I don't know if I feel up to a party tonight, guys." I hesitated. "I haven't really been sleeping." "We're not going to a party," David said quietly. "Carla's just messing with you. We're going exploring. It's an old campus, and we heard about a wing that was shut down. They never renovated it when this place became a college. We want to check it out, see what's there. There's all kinds of urban legends about it." I stared at him. I think that's the most I'd ever heard him say all in one go. He gave a little embarrassed half shrug as we kept walking. "All right," I said, "sounds cool, but I still have all my stuff. Can I drop it off at home first?" "Yeah," said Alex, "no worries. We aren't going there yet. We're waiting for it to get dark first. Seems more seasonally appropriate that way," he laughed. I shivered a little at that. What the hell was I getting myself into? But I didn't want these guys to know how close I was coming to a full-blown meltdown. I had to save face. Plus, there's a little part of me that's always been an adrenaline junkie, a thrill seeker, and I really just thought, why the hell not? How could it possibly get worse? I was a fool. We agreed to meet up in the quad at 9:30 that night, and I went home to eat, change, and take a short nap. Lord knows I didn't need to fall asleep in the abandoned wing of the college. I dropped my stuff on the floor, feeling the exhaustion of the week in my bones. I'll just lie down for a few minutes, I thought, then I'll make dinner. That was the last time I slept through the night. I woke up the next morning, feeling better rested than I had in weeks. I remember opening my eyes and thinking, shit, I stood them up. They probably think I wussed out. I grabbed my old brick phone and checked the texts. Sure enough, there were a handful of missed calls and a couple of texts from Alex and Carla, asking where I was. The last one said, "Okay, guess you are not coming. See you TMRW. We'll bring you a souvenir." Winky face. Well, at least they weren't mad. I checked the time, 11 a.m., and judged it late enough to give Alex a call. Straight to voicemail. Tried Carla. Same. They were out late and let their phones die. Don't freak out, I told myself sternly. But something felt off. Probably just the lingering sense of paranoia, or maybe something from a dream I'd forgotten. I tried to brush it off and got ready for the day. The showers were as creepy as ever, and I shivered, even with the water turned almost to boiling hot. I hurried as much as I could, skipping the shampoo in favor of getting out of there fast. I tried calling Alex and Carla again as I got dressed, but their phones were still off. It was noon by this point, and I was seriously starting to worry. What if they got caught? I thought, what if they got hurt somehow? They lived in the same building as me. Like I said earlier, David and Alex were roommates in a second-floor room, and Carla and Sarah lived together on the third floor, down the hall from me. I checked both rooms, knocked for ages, but no one answered. My worry was beginning to blossom into a full-fledged panic. Calm down, I told myself, there's nothing wrong. They probably went out drinking and got locked up for public indecency or something. But I knew that wasn't right. Maybe Alex and Carla. But David? No. Something had gone wrong. I had to find them. By the time I got onto the campus, I had almost succeeded in calming myself down. Then I saw the police tape, the cop cars, the crowd of people that had gathered around. Logically, there was no way for me to know, but I knew then they were dead. I didn't know how I knew or even why that would be the conclusion, but I was certain. I was almost right. I made my way over to the police barrier, trying to get a closer look. I had to shove my way through a little knot of people, mostly people I recognized from class. Rubberneckers. I didn't want to know, but I had to know. It's all a mistake. It's all a mistake. The little voice in my head chanted, it's all a mistake. Everyone is fine. Go find out what happened. Probably a drunk driver. It's all a mistake. A police officer came up to me as I started to duck my way under the caution tape. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. There's nothing you need to see here, he said, not unkindly. I stared at him. What happened? I managed to get out, afraid to ask, afraid to know. He frowned at me. I'm not a rubbernecker, I said hurriedly, but my friends, well, they were going to explore part of the campus last night, and now I can't find them, and I'm really worried that something happened to them, and his gaze sharpened. What's your name, miss? He asked suddenly. Sam Weisberg. Am I in trouble? I asked. Well, he said slowly, I hope not. You better come with me. I followed him through the now-growing crowd, shivering even in my hoodie and jeans. It was a beach town, like I said, so autumn and especially late October was starting to really cool down. I saw him look at me. He noticed my shivering, but thankfully he said nothing and steered me into the admin building. Collins, the cop said, addressing an older man in a suit. She may know something. Miss Weisberg. He turned to me. This is Detective Collins. You tell him what you just told me. The man, Collins, looked at me sharply. I think my friends are in trouble, Mr. Collins, I said quietly. I was supposed to meet them last night to go exploring, and I fell asleep instead. Now no one is answering their phones. They were going to explore a closed-off part of the campus, and I just have this horrible feeling. What happened? Are they okay? Despite my best efforts, I was about to cry. God, Sam, don't lose it now. Come on. Hold it together, I thought desperately. It didn't help being on campus. The awful feeling was back. I had an itching on my neck like a pair of eyes was boring its way through, but I couldn't look. I needed the cops to trust me. Come on, Sam, you can do it. Collins looked at me for a moment more, almost like he knew what was happening. Then he said, Can you tell me the names of your friends? Alex Davis, Carla Moreno, Sarah Sterling, and David, something with an M. Meacham or Markham, maybe. We aren't real close, I said quickly. Something in his face, in his posture, crumpled. I'm so sorry, Sam, he said. There's been a terrible accident. The tears that had been damming behind my eyes started to trickle out. I furiously swiped at them. What happened? Collins hesitated. Please, I should have been with them. Please tell me what happened. He sighed. We don't know what happened, not exactly. And I can't give you a whole lot of details. But I can tell you that your friends Alex, Carla, and Sarah have passed away. A member of the cleaning staff found their bodies early this morning and alerted the police. I'm so sorry, he said quietly, watching my face, waiting to see how I'd react, I guess. Oh my God, no. I said, no, please. I just saw them. I cried in earnest then. They hadn't been my lifelong friends, and we were never super close, but I had just seen them. We had pizza together 3 days ago, and I would have been with them last night if I hadn't fallen asleep. As much as I hate to admit it, and as much as this may make me an awful person, that's really what disturbed me the most. It could have been me. Suddenly, I want to go home. Not back to my dorm, but really home. Back to my friends, my parents. Back to being a kid, where shit like this just didn't happen. But that wasn't an option. I was an adult. I took a deep breath. What about David? I asked, breath hitching in my chest. He would have been with them last night, too. Collins and my cop looked at each other, then back at me. There was no one else there, Collins said in a way that was probably meant to be gentle. No DNA, no footprints, nothing. Are you sure David was with them? Sure he didn't skip out on the adventure. I don't know. I muttered miserably, maybe. He's a weird dude. but he seemed pretty excited about it yesterday. Can you tell us where he lives? Collins asked. Maybe he knows something that can help. I looked at him. There was something I had missed. You said there was an accident, I said slowly, but you're looking for a culprit. Weren't you telling me? Collins shook his head. Ma'am, you really don't want to know. I squared my shoulders and wiped away the last of my tears. I deserve to know. I don't need to see crime scene photos or anything like that, but I want to know the truth. How do my friends die? If I had gone last night, how would I have died? I want to know the truth. He sighed. I'm sorry, but this is an ongoing investigation. Legally, I can't give you any more details than I already have. I'll let you know if we have any further questions for you, he said firmly. Oh, and if your friend David turns up, please give me a call. He handed me his business card. My cop gently touched my elbow. All right, miss, let's get you out of here. He steered me toward the exit, and I went with him, numbly. It can't be true. It's a mistake. It's a mistake. Even in my haze of shock and barely suppressed terror, I knew it was no mistake. There was something hideously wrong, not just with the deaths of my friends, but with the whole campus. Why else would I be having these feelings? I was never depressed before this, and the explanation of stress was wearing very thin. To make matters worse, the nightmares had come back with a vengeance. And keeping the dream journal was making me notice details I had missed before. The fact that the screaming was coming from figures in the center of the lecture hall, figures strapped to operating tables. The way that the screams had started to sound like my friends. The way that the evil doctor was somehow familiar, someone I knew. I just couldn't place my finger on who. And, maybe worst of all, the screaming had started to coalesce into words. Help me and Ron and Sam. They were screaming my name. Edit. Hey guys, I guess I shoved my thumb drive in my purse last night, so I actually have the next part to post here. My fiancé was right. It is kind of cathartic posting all this. I really shouldn't be posting at work, but, well, my boss doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Update number 1. I had to do something. By Tuesday, I was a wreck. I couldn't just sit and wait for insanity to arrive. I had to be proactive. So I did the only thing I could think of, research. I decided to be methodical, detached. I do some independent research after class. I don't have my research notes anymore, but the list I made was roughly like this. Alex, Carla, Sarah. Who were they? Some other connection? Where's David? Who is he? No DNA at crime scene. What happened? News reports, autopsy reports, think CSI. My search for some connection between them proved futile. They had come from different cities. No one seemed to have known each other before college, and their Facebooks had simply become memorial walls. They didn't even have mutual friends other than some of the other students that we all knew. David didn't have a Facebook page, at least not that I could find, but I couldn't really remember his last name, and I probably just wasn't looking for the right guy. He still hadn't turned up, and I was getting more and more worried that something had happened to him, too, something the cops hadn't figured out yet. I didn't have a way to reach him other than class or pounding on his door, and both avenues had proved fruitless since Saturday. On the other hand, maybe he suddenly went out of town for a family emergency or something. It's not like we were really close. There's no reason he would leave me a note or anything, and like I said, we didn't have each other's phone numbers. My search for exactly what happened proved to be slightly more successful. I found a news report in one of the smaller, local journals, which detailed the assumed sequence of events. Location redacted. October 21st, 2006 students found dead in Halloween horror, homicide. The bodies of 3 redacted students were found early this morning by Frank Bloomer, a veteran member of the college janitorial staff. I came in early to restock the supply closets and smelled something awful, said Frank, something rotten and metallic. I thought some of the students had set off a stink bomb or something. You know they get real rowdy around this time of year. He went on to describe how he followed the scent to an abandoned wing of the school, one that's been under renovations for years, and stumbled upon a grisly scene. In all my years at this school, I never saw anything as bad as this, he said. Never. It was like one of those paintings, the splatter ones, all in red all over the room. There were pieces, well, Those kids were dead long before I got there. It was like the stories. That's all I'll say. I told the rest to the cops. Mr. Bloomer is not a suspect in the case. The police representative declined to comment on the investigation, which is ongoing. I shuddered. They were found in pieces? What the hell? Did they run into a pack of coyotes or a mountain lion? Was there a serial killer on campus? And what the hell did it mean? Like the stories. I made a mental note to pick up pepper spray and an extra lock for the door next time I went out. I shook my head and stretched, popping the kinks in my back from having been hunched over my laptop for hours, researching. I heard a quiet noise from my bedroom, a light clatter like something was knocked over, and I looked up, startled. As I shifted, the angle of my laptop screen changed and reflected the room behind me, and as it did, I caught a flash of something awful. It was Alex, but not Alex as I had known him. He was hunched over in extreme pain and clutching what was left of his abdomen with his arm. His other arm was gone, a few bone fragments jutting out. I froze, too afraid to move, too afraid to scream, utterly paralyzed as he lifted his head. There was a row of stitches above one ear and a stream of blackened blood trickling from one eye as he raised his gaze to lock eyes with me in the reflection. The sheer horror of meeting his lifeless gaze broke my paralysis. I screamed and whirled, flinging my laptop at him, ready to run, but there was nothing there. My laptop hit the opposite wall and clattered to the floor as the battery pack flew off and skittered into the kitchenette. Breathing hard, I looked wildly around the apartment. Had I imagined that? It was so vivid, so real. It's just stress, Sam. There's no such thing as ghosts. You're just stressed. You saw the lamp or something and freaked. How can you even be sure of what you saw? You only saw it for a second. I almost believed it. I was afraid for two reasons. Either I was losing my mind, or there's no such thing as ghosts. I just needed to get out of the dorm, get some fresh air. It was well after dark and a weeknight, but there's always something happening in a college town, and this one was no different. I've never been big on parties, but I needed to be around other people. There was a regular bonfire down at the beach, about a mile's walk from the campus, and I pulled on a hoodie and some sneakers to check it out. I knew this was just paranoia talking, just the aftershock of the adrenaline rush, but I was getting that creepy feeling again, like I was being watched. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, but I'd turn and nothing would be there. I just needed to get some air. I'm not ashamed to tell you. I bolted out the door. As I hit the street, I slowed to a jog and then a walk, stuffed my hands in the pocket of my hoodie, and chuckled nervously. Man, I definitely needed to get out of there, I thought to myself. I'm starting to see things. I made my way to the beach and the usual bonfire spot, but I could tell even from a distance that there weren't many people out tonight. The fire was smoldering down to embers, and there were a few figures walking along the beach, but for the most part, it was deserted. I figured I'd at least walk down and get some space. I ran into a couple of people I recognized from class, including one guy who told me to be safe, man. There's some crazy people out there. Oh, I know. He introduced himself as Chris and offered to walk me home, but I told him I'd be fine. He was pretty insistent. It was a little creepy, but I'm sure he meant well. My short walk turned into a longer one as my head refused to clear. The jittery, paranoid feeling had left, but what it left in its place was not much better. A bone-deep exhaustion and too many questions I had no answers for. I lost track of time as I walked along the beach, then back up into the town and wandered through the quiet streets. Asterisk, why did they have to die? Who could have done this to them? I should have been with them. I was almost with them, asterisk. And most of all, what happened? I was sick of these questions with no answers. I looked up and found that I had successfully wandered in a giant circle right back to my front door. My exhaustion hit me again like a ton of bricks, and it was all I could do to climb the stairs back to my third-floor dorm room. I was too tired to even register the paranoia returning and the flickering movement in my peripheral vision. I chalked everything up to lack of sleep and collapsed in a bed, still dressed. Almost immediately, I fell asleep and right back into the nightmare. This time I was in a different lecture hall, one I didn't recognize. It felt old and unused, like no one had been there for years. The chair I was sitting in was rusted and warped, and I knew that this was one of the rooms in the abandoned part of the campus. As soon as I realized it, everything froze like the universe taking a deep breath, and the lights went out. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Could only listen as the high-pitched whine of a drill and distant screaming began. "Wake up! Sam, wake up, this is a dream. Wake up!" I was screaming in my own head, but couldn't make a sound. The hellish counterpoint of the drill and the screams grew louder, and I knew he was coming. I had to move. With a huge effort, I got up out of the chair and started running. Slow motion, fighting to get to the stairs and get out as the sounds are coming closer and closer, and I always trip, and hit my head on the stairs. Oh God, he's almost here. Look over, and there he is, that grin, that drill. Is that Sarah strapped to the table down there? Oh God, he's almost here. Wake up, Sam, wake up. Gasping for air, covered in sweat, I bolted upright in bed. My head was killing me. I looked at the clock. 3:30. I've been asleep for a few hours. I rubbed my eyes wearily, taking deep breaths. It was only a dream. I needed to get it together. I could feel the sweat drying on my body, and suddenly, more than anything, I just want a long, hot shower. The dream journal. I was never going to write this shit down. I was even willing to brave the creepy communal shower room. Anything would be worth scrubbing the dried sweat away. Maybe it would help my headache, too. I changed into a robe, grabbed my towel and shampoo, and headed for the door. Maybe I'll detour and take an aspirin first. I thought, my head is about to explode. I kept a little first aid kit on my dresser, next to a vanity mirror. When I went to grab an aspirin, I noticed something weird in the mirror. A bruise was forming on my temple, right where I knocked on the stairs in my dream. It was weird. I figure I must have knocked my head on the bed frame or something. I swallowed the painkiller and shrugged it off. It was just one of those things, a small weirdness in the ocean of weirdnesses I was currently treading water in. I just needed a shower, get the remnants of the nightmare out of my head, and get on with it. As I walked down the hall to the shower room, I started getting that itchy, scared feeling on the back of my neck again, but I refused to look behind me. Everything is fine. There's nothing there, I told myself. It's 3 a.m., and you just had a nightmare. Come on, Sam. Put on your big girl panties and deal with it. The shower room was dark and empty when I got there. A heaviness settled in the pit of my stomach, and the muscles along my spine tightened. There's nothing to be scared of. It's just a room, I told myself. I wasn't very convincing. Moving quickly, I flipped on the lights and turned on one of the showers, letting the water heat up. As the first curls of steam started rising, I felt myself start to relax the tiniest bit. I even started humming some pop song that was playing endlessly at the time. I hung up my robe and towel, grabbed the shampoo, and pulled the curtain closed as I stepped over the lip of the shower stall and into the spray of hot water. Eyes closed, I tilted my head back and started lathering shampoo into my hair, still humming. That's when I heard it. Scrape. The unmistakable sound of someone quietly opening a door. I immediately went still, stopped humming, practically stopped breathing. My eyes were still closed, and my hair was full of shampoo. I was petrified, straining my ears to hear anything else. Seconds ticked by, and my heartbeat throbbed in my ears. All I could hear was the sound of the shower and my own shallow breathing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it's just one of the other residents who woke up and had to take a piss. Just as I was about to relax, just before I brushed it off as my imagination running wild, I heard another sound, one that made my blood run cold. It was a kind of shuffling, dragging noise like slow footsteps, and it was getting closer. I frantically started scrubbing the shampoo from my hair as quickly and silently as I could manage. I couldn't take being blind. I had to see what was happening. It felt like an eternity when really it probably only took seconds. But by the time I could see again, I was in full-fledged panic mode. I stared at the shower curtain, straining to see any shape or movement through the thin, plasticky cloth, but I couldn't tell who was there, if anyone. I steeled my nerves, took a deep breath, and very carefully peeked around the edge of the curtain. Nothing. The room was empty. I let out a huge, gusty sigh of relief, turned around to turn off the water, and came face to face with Carla. But it wasn't Carla as I had known her. She was clinging to the ceiling like an enormous, bloated spider, with her head hanging down to look me in the eye. Her limbs had been dislocated and were at unnatural angles. Her neck was impossibly long, and I could see the vertebrae sticking out where her neck had been cleanly snapped, so hard that the bone burst through the skin. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when her dead eyes focused on me, when she leaned closer, close enough to touch, close enough to kiss, and whispered to me, with breath like the grave, "Run." I'll be honest with you. I blacked out. I woke up in my dorm, curled in the corner of my closet, rocking back and forth. I had left all my things in the shower room and was soaking wet and completely naked. I still had the bruise on my temple, which had started aching again, and a massive bruise down my left side. I also had skinned palms and knees, and somehow I'd ripped off a toenail. All that being said, I felt lucky to be alive. Fourth story. I was told that you guys would like my university's campus legend. I go to a university in the Chicagoland area. We have our own campus legend. So, in 1952, after the war ended, a young man came back to the States. He didn't have a sweetheart waiting for him to impregnate, so he decided to better himself and go get a college education. He lived on the top floor of one of the dorms. He didn't have many friends and had some social anxiety, which was probably the result of combat. With no roommates, he spent much of his time in his room reading, writing, playing marbles, and other generally introverted things. One night, all of the men on the floor are awoken by this horrible screaming coming from the young man's room. The other guys are understandably freaked out by this, knowing that the young man is a total shut-in and that he had seen some shit in the war. After an hour or so, the screaming stops and a young man comes out of the room pale white and covered in sweat. He sprints to the bathroom and immediately jumps in the shower. The other guys that woke up think that he must have had a night terror or a flashback or something, so they make sure he's all right, then go back to bed. A few days pass, and the other men on the floor don't really see the young man. They figure he took some time off of school and went home to clear his head. After about a week, they all notice a terrible smell on the floor. They figure something got into the radiators and that it was just spreading around. Day by day, the smell gets worse and worse, and they start to worry. They go to investigate the floor and realize that the smell is coming from the young man's room. They wake the dorm administrator to come open the door immediately, fearing the worst. They got the worst. They find the young man hanging from the pipes in the ceiling with his throat sliced open. The incredible amount of blood hits them with a stench that they cannot bear. The blood had already had the chance to coagulate and harden beneath him, where it permanently stained the linoleum. That room is the only carpeted room in the dorm hall to this day. 4 years after this happened, that room was closed to live in. In 2002, they reopened it but had to close it again because everyone who lived in the room for the next 8 years attempted suicide. There have been rumors that on some nights in November, you hear screaming coming from the room. The room below it, which is now a female floor, occasionally hears marbles rolling across the floor above, which is still carpeted. After hearing the story, most people choose not to live on the floor or choose to move. Fifth story. There's a serial killer at my university. There's a serial killer at Virginia State University. Growing up, my mother had made me watch murder shows with her, which eventually turned me into a paranoid 20-year-old who's afraid of her own shadow. My mother had heard of the killings and begged me to come home, but I couldn't just up and leave in the middle of the semester. I just have to stick it out and hope for the best. I wouldn't be worried if the killer had a pattern, but he didn't. He killed men and women. Nobody was safe. So far, 8 students have been murdered, 6 males and 2 females. He branded them, 2, as if he were proud of what he did. He carved what number victim they were on their foreheads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hey, my train of thought was interrupted by my roommate, Emma. Hey, I greeted. How's it out there? Pretty quiet. Besides the police cars patrolling, she replied, getting a yogurt out of our fridge and plopping down onto the armchair. Looks like the hash-slinging slasher couldn't wait until midterms were over to begin his little killing spree. Tell me about it, I muttered, flipping through another page in my binder. I'm up to here in study notes. The entire coffee table was scattered with mathematical equations, scientific equations, and 2 English lit books that I had yet to read for next week. No one told you to take 18 units, Emma taunted, scooping a spoonful of yogurt into her mouth. Piss off, Em. Sorry. I'll tell you what, let's go to the library. We still got a few hours to kill before curfew anyway. I got some studying to do too. I sighed. I had been in our cramped dorm all day. Maybe a change of scenery would help me focus a bit more. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll try anything at this point, I muttered and gathered my things. Emma was right. It was terrifyingly quiet outside. Everyone was too scared to come out of their rooms, even though the murders usually took place in the early morning or late at night. Not Emma, though. I guess Emma wasn't afraid of anything. Surprisingly, there were quite a bit of students in the library. Despite everything going on, midterms were still taking place, which to me was a good thing. It kept us distracted from the ugliness outside. What type of rock is this? Emma asked, pointing to a sandy and crumbly rock in her geology textbook. Sedimentary. I mumbled, then went back to solving equations. We studied in silence after that, Emma occasionally asking me about another rock she couldn't identify. Having a change of scenery actually did help me concentrate better. All I had left to do was read the 2 English lit books. An hour later, Emma closed her geology book. I'm beat. Want me to wait for you? I waved my hand, not bothering to look up from my book. Nah, go ahead. I'll be there in half an hour. Okay, see you later. She yawned before gathering her things and leaving the library. The second book was much bigger, but I figured I could read at least a quarter of it before curfew and continue the rest over the weekend. It was a combination of Othello, Hamlet, Alexander Pope's essay criticism, and about 3 or 4 other stories. I had finished Othello and gotten to Hamlet when my phone began vibrating. I blindly kept pressing the decline button repeatedly. It was probably Emma and her stupid geology rocks. I was making good time. After Hamlet, I was halfway through Pope when I looked at the library clock. 9:15 p.m. Oh crap, curfew was at 8:30. I'm dead, I whispered and furiously gathered my things. I hadn't even noticed I was the last one here. I'm dead. I ran out the door, dropping at least 2 of my pencils in the process. It was eerily silent, even more silent than it was earlier. With a nervous sigh, I began fast walking back to my dorm, which was a 15-minute walk. However, with my huge bag and textbooks, it would probably take 25. I pulled out my phone and called Emma, who answered on the first ring. Where the hell are you? I've been calling you for over an hour. I know. I'm sorry. I lost track of time. I'll be there soon, okay? I'm meeting you halfway. Emma, no. Just stay there. Look, if I'm not home by 9:50, then come look for me or call the cops. It's too dangerous for you to leave. She huffed in irritation. Fine. 9:50. Not a minute sooner. She hung up before I could reply, and I sighed tiredly, stuffing my phone into my pocket. Breaking curfew too? I jumped 1,000,000 feet in the air, my heart leaping out of my chest as I spun around and meet the green eyes of a man. He smiled and ran a hand through his hair. I saw you in the library. Figured you could use a guardian angel, he said. I'm okay. My dorm isn't far from here, I replied. I insist. A lady shouldn't be out by herself at these hours, especially not with a killer on the loose. I can manage. You can never be too safe. Name's Ethan, by the way, he said, walking alongside me much to my dismay. Nice to meet you, I replied. Are you not going to give me your name? No. Ethan chuckled. All right, fair enough. What year are you in? Junior. Senior. Chemistry major. That's nice. He raised an eyebrow. You don't talk much, do you? Not to strangers in the middle of the night in particular, no, I said. Again, he chuckled. I can respect that. I promise you I'm not a killer. Just looking out. I know I was being kind of jerk at this point, but something about this guy just seemed off. I couldn't pinpoint it, but my gut instinct told me this guy was bad news. It was still a 10 or so minute walk to my dorm, so when we came across the north dorms, I took this as my chance to book it. "This is my stop," I said, stopping in front of the building. Thanks for the walk to my dorm, I mean." He smiled, white teeth shining against the darkness of the night. "Don't mention it. Hey, listen, I know this is a bit straightforward, but could I get your number?" My small smile faded. I'm sorry, I don't know you. I don't just give out my number like that." His boyish smile was replaced with a hardened expression. "Really? I walk you back to your dorm, and you can't even give me your number?" "I never asked you to. I don't owe you anything, Ethan." Gritting my teeth, I turned to walk off when one of his arms suddenly wrapped around me in a bear hug and the other clamped over my mouth. "You do owe me," he sneered. He began dragging me towards the woods, and I quickly planted my feet into my fighting stance. I stepped on his foot as hard as I could and slammed my head into his mouth. Once he released me, I spun around and elbowed him in the throat. I must have hit his Adam's apple pretty hard because he gurgled and fell to the ground. A man's groin and throat are always his weak spots. He tried to crawl away, and I kicked him in the head. "Well, that's 9 in a row that the terrified, innocent little girl act works," I said, taking my knife out of my back pocket. I flipped Ethan over and pressed my foot into his throat, feeling the crack what was left of his Adam's apple. "When a girl says no, Ethan, she means a no." I sneered and stomped his throat. His blank, green eyes stared up at the sky, and I smirked. After carving the number 9 into his forehead, I picked up my things and quickly ran to my dorm before Emma could throw a fit. After scolding me for breaking curfew, she went to her room and I went to mine. I wasn't supposed to have a number 9 tonight, but Ethan just had to show up and not give me a break. If you're reading this far, please don't think I'm some monster who targets random individuals, because I'm not. I target those who do nothing but inflict pain. Partner abusers, women abusers, child abusers, and so forth. I think I do a pretty good deed, don't you? As I was about to go to sleep, my phone rang. Seeing my best friend's name on it, I quickly answered. "Hello. Hey, how are things over there?" I sighed. I didn't have anything planned, but I got attacked and had to improvise. Aside from that, all is well. That was number 9. One more to go. I know you can do this. Think of the next person you're saving whenever you have to do it. Yeah, I know. I can always count on you, Whit. You have no idea how proud I am of you, Chloe. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.